Morning all. Let's have a look at another classic Bobby Fischer memorable game this morning. It was played in 1959. It was played against a classic legend, Svetozar Gligoric, who unfortunately passed away in August of just this year, 2012. He was approaching his 90th birthday, 89 I believe, so he's generally considered one of the greatest Yugoslav and Serbian players ever. There's lots of information on Wiki which I recommend you check out. Actually, for me personally, you know, the King's Indian defence ideas he created were absolutely amazing. Some of them, like sacking knights on f4, and used in some of my games. Very dynamic. His personality was a very popular personality on scene, trotting around the world, trying to play the board, not the person. And he wrote an autobiography, I play against pieces, i.e. playing without hostility towards the opponent or playing differently against different players for psychological reasons, playing the board, not the man. So, a nice guy. So playing white against Fischer, he kicked off with e4 and Fischer played c5. We're in for a battle here. After knight f3, d6, an open Sicilian. Okay, knight f6, knight c3, a6, knight off, bishop g5. This line is very, very aggressive. Fischer's been in very dangerous positions against this system we're about to see. I think after e6 we see f4. So the idea here is queen f3, get ready to castle queenside, and then maybe throw these pawns up against black's king. Looks very dangerous for black, especially if black's going to castle kingside. Bishop e7, after queen f3, queen c7. Now white castles queenside. After knight bd7 with the aggressive move g4. Black plays now b5. White now plays bishop takes f6. And Fischer plays g takes f6. Now usually this move g takes f6 would imply that castling kingside is totally ruled out. Usually black would try and castle queenside in master games we've covered on this channel anyway. I think some of the Botvinnik Bronstein World Championship games had this variation, this same variation with black castling queenside. I think Botvinnik castling queenside and sometimes getting a draw or a win from that. It was difficult not to crack with these double pawns here with black's control, extra control of the centre. White tries here. Gligoric plays f5, putting more pressure immediately on e6, maybe conceding the e5 square. That's pounced in with knight e5, attacking the queen. The queen goes here to h3, so tying up a rook. Also this diagonal might be useful for e6 later. Also queen h6 to g7 might be useful later if g4 is protected. And you might think, well, black shouldn't really be castling kingside here. Surely somehow, or maybe with the pressure on e6, it's annoying that bishop b7 seems to be ruled out. In fact, there's been tau games in this system where taus put more and more pressure on this poor e6 pawn in this line, because f5 really does accentuate the e6 issue. And here it seems, well, could black maybe try bishop d7 perhaps, and then castle queenside? We'll have to check this out in the second pass. Very complex position, but seemingly outrageously, Fischer castles kingside. Isn't there a ready-made attack here? I'm pretty sure our engine friends will bust this in the second pass, this whole position for black. But let's go with it. Okay. Gligoric plays knight ce2. It looks pretty reasonable. If b4 is going to be played anyway, why not get the knight over here? Maybe over here, like to h5 would be dangerous. We'll just put pressure on e6. If this pawn ever moves, then there'll be knight d5. If the knight's on f4, it looks pretty dangerous. King h8 is played, and now we see knight f4. Not only that now, though, but maybe even g6 is a problem. There looks to be lots of tactical opportunities optically Fischer plays rook g8. Okay, apparently he indicated after the game it was strategically justified in some ways to castle kingside, but maybe the queen's location is blocking the h pawn. It's with the knight on e5, creating a battery on h7 maybe is slower than usual. How can you use you can't use d3 that easily. Perhaps you can try and use g3 to then move the queen and create a battery. So in fact rook g1 is played, so that frees the queen up maybe a bit more to go somewhere dangerous. But we see an energetic move now from Fischer, trying to make use of the queen maybe on h3 still. He plays d5. d5. Okay, now we see f takes e6, and now d takes e4, spicing things up. At least this bishop's going to have some scope if this pawn was taken. Maybe knight takes f7. We're going to have to really check that out in the second part of this game. It's got very, very hairy all of a sudden, this position, as in very tactical. So knight d5 attacking queen and bishop. Queen c5, keeping hold of the bishop from c5. Okay, and hitting the knight. Knight takes e7, queen takes e7, and again attacking the queen now with knight f5, which looks like a really dangerous move in principle, because now if the queen takes e6, this double pawn complex seems dangerous for king safety. Usually that's the case. Can Fischer get something going on h7 here? Well, he plays actually queen h6 now. Queen h6. It looks as though, for example, rook d8 might be useful to drag and drop the rook away to get use of g7. So g7 is a bit more sensitive after queen h6. Taking on g4 would seem very dangerous in this position. Rook takes g4 would seem mating. But we'll check in the second pass the defensive possibilities. It's important for black, I believe, to connect rooks, which he does with bishop d7, connecting the rooks. Okay, now we see rook d6, a forcing move again. And Fischer doesn't move the queen here. If he moves the queen, I think his position is all over after the queen takes f6 anyway. If the queen moves, queen takes f6 is mating on that g7. So, okay. So, Fischer's resource here, which he's relying on, is to undermine the knight on f5, undermining this knight. The tactical move, knight takes g4. Okay, if this resource works, then maybe rook d6 was inaccurate in some way. So has black survived here? He's attacking the queen and he's undermined f5. So we see here rook takes g4, queen takes f5. And apparently no knockout blow, because queen takes f1 is threatened. You can't just win bishop or anything. Also, they're protecting each other anyway. This queen's protected by the bishop, and there's no knockout blow, it seems. Okay, so rook takes g8. We go into a more simplified position now. Everything comes off soon. After rook takes f6, it's more simplified but still dangerous for black. Rook takes f6, of course, protects the bishop. Queen d5, also protecting f7 from there, and it looks as though rook g1 or e3 will be useful, to threaten queen d2 check, and if it takes, then maybe queen g5 check on the rook. In this position, rook d6 is played, and we see queen f5, rook f6, repetition. Now queen g5 check, getting the queens off. The worst seems over for Fischer. How did he survive that? Was the inaccuracy rook d6? But the game has just started. After queen takes, rook takes, we see rook takes f7, and now bishop g4. So equal on pawns here. The king steps into the center, threatening maybe king e3 to try and put pressure on e4. That's reinforced. King e3. Okay. Rook g1. Bishop goes to h3 here. With a rook on the 7th, black's king is worse than white's king. It seems white's king is free to roam here with very, very dangerous effect. Also, by the way, as I found out recently, if the king can sometimes go to h6, that's very dangerous as well. So we have here a position which still contains issues for Fischer, for sure, with this aggressive white king against his passive king and the rook on the 7th. So is he out of the frying pan into the fire of the endgame? Check, and the king walks a bit. Bishop d1, now the king walks a bit more. Okay, so why is c2 being given up? Well, there's the idea of bishop f5, for example, which would provide a bridge on the f file for king f6 and rook h7 being very dangerous as an example, or just rook f8 mating. The king will control some key squares. The king is going to make black's king if Fischer is not careful. Fischer tries e3, and then we see bishop f5. Now really does seem to be a huge threat of king f6. Okay, but now another resourceful move from Fischer, perhaps against this. Rook g1, not only setting up e2, e1, but now there's rook g8 as a defensive measure if needed. Rook takes h7 check, king g8. And then we see rook c7. Okay. Bishop g4. Okay. So, white takes on g4. Rook takes g4. And this is tricky for this e-pawn now, but Gligoric plays rook c3, rounding that e-pawn up. e2, rook e3, rook g2. Okay. And in this position, you might think, well, h4 might be useful, but king d4 is played because there's the idea of always winning c2. If king can get to c2 first, then h4 even better. e1 is played here, trying to get to c2 immediately, so taking on c2 now. Rook b1. Okay, and we've reached a situation. Fischer's just pawned down, and he could, you'd think, take on h2 here. He doesn't do that. He plays king f7. Okay. And again, you know, why doesn't white do anything about the h2 pawn? White plays a3. We see king e6. And now b3. And finally that's taken on h2. King c5 is now played, as though this is really dangerous for black's queenside pawns now. King d7, king b6. Okay, there is the possibility of checking here, but Fischer chose rook a2. And here now Fischer just goes into a safe position, it seems, where he's still equal on pawns. Most of his problems are solved. He's only a pawn down potentially here, so, and that pawn is soon to be taken. But now we have a drawn position, technically drawn position. Rooks come off, and the players now agree a draw. It was kind of scary what Fischer did, castling into the attack and surviving there. Let's really scrutinise this with the engines. Was this actually possible, all of this? Really? Let's go back. To castle into the attack? That's what makes the game so memorable. Castling into it, Fischer's nicknamed the game. Why is he castle into the attack? Would many of us do this? So, let's see. I suspect this is one game we're going to find a bust. Surely. Fischer's quite young at this time in this game. This can't be justified. He thought it was strategically justified. Okay, it's a castle here. Engine's initial evaluation is it's only slight advantage for white. Interesting. Okay. So knight ce2, we see king h8, knight f4, rook g8. Is black really solid here? We're over half pawn now. Rook g1, introducing various attacking maneuvers as well as protecting g4. We saw the move d5, which is really liked by Houdini, the move d5 here. Okay. So f takes e6 was chosen in the game. If e takes d5, e takes f, is no big deal, it seems. Black's fine. So we'll go with f takes, d takes e4, and we saw knight d5, queen c5. E takes f7. Here might be interesting. In this position. But not too interesting. Black's pieces are getting activated like the bishop on c8. So say knight takes, queen takes. Black might be okay here. Without this diagonal on h7 and that pawn on e4, it seems a lot of black's problems are already solved with that initial d5 break. So let's go back. So Gligoric chose knight takes e7 and keeping not trying to win a pawn here, playing knight f5, just giving up the e6 pawn. So we saw queen takes e6, queen h6, and it seems black was even doing okay technically after bishop d7. To show the dangers of the position, well, if knight takes g4, that's the end of game, isn't it? Rook takes, it's just mate in 2. So there's nothing much else really apart from bishop d7. Okay, so we see rook d6, and again the evaluation seems to be about equal. And you know, knight takes g4 is in this position a definite legitimate resource. Then why there's nothing else apart from rook d6 here apparently. You don't really want to play a move like h3, then you're ruling out maneuvers. So maybe it was, as Fischer indicated, a strategically justified decision to castle kingside. He has this strong knight, the bishop hasn't got this diagonal. It seems there's no better at this depth than rook d6, unbelievably. Or maybe believably, I mean visually, where are the attacking routes to black's king now? It seems the d5 really did solve a lot of problems for Fischer in this game, playing that early d5. So rook d6, maybe there were more problems evident later though. Okay, so knight takes g4, we get some simplification here. Okay, where rook f4 is actually given as an more accurate move potentially than rook takes g8. So it seems Fischer was doing absolutely fine, almost there, almost. Now it's gone to about 0. Evaluation, it's zeroed to equality. But in the game continuation, as we're about to see here, now after queen g5, white's advantage, well, became a bit minuscule from being absolutely dead 0. Queen d5, just agree a draw after queen d5. Now why agree a draw? Hold on a sec. You might think, what was this about queen d5? If you don't play rook d6, well, rook takes a6 as an option, queen e5, and now what? It's dangerous, isn't it? If check here, rook g1, black's actually doing very well there. Well, at least equal. So okay, it looks about equal, but so in the game we saw queen g5, so why did white suddenly get something? Rook takes f7, No, we're again about equal. Bishop goes to g4 here. Maybe bishop e6 technically is interesting to look at. Again, we're about equal. I think here, one point is the black king might be able to escape with some activity in this position, with king g7 anyway. So in the game, we saw the black king locked up actually. Off to bishop g4. Maybe there was a slight mistake here with bishop g4. This position now, off to bishop h3. The king is imprisoned on the 8th rank, but the engine doesn't mind the position for black. Check. Bishop d1, which releases the pawn, of course, otherwise bishop's going to be lost. So king e5, we're still about equal here. Was there something here which was missed? Check. Bishop g4. That was taken. We see rook c3. Engine likes that way of getting the pawn. Now they move h4 all the time here. h4 was interesting, but here e1 just taking on c2 again. So king d4. We saw this rook and pawn ending. Was there any mischance here? Because the king actually seems very aggressive to get onto a6. This must be why the rook must stop the king going to a6, because then b5 will drop and we've got two passed pawns. So rook takes h2 is not to be advised here. I'm not sure. Let's just absolutely check. Rook takes h2. Okay. Can a bridge be built here with rook d1, for example, for rook d6 in this situation? If rook d1, then rook h2. So it's not so easy, that position. So anyway, king f7 was played. Now if white tries for h4, does it actually make any difference with that h4 pawn? This position. King f6, say, king d5. Keeping the king out with this rook. King f5, and maybe going for this pawn. And white can't really do anything about that pawn anyway. This looks about equal still. The resources are there to defend this, it would seem. Okay, so let's go back. In the game, a3 was played. And here, it looks as though h3 is a tiny bit more interesting than before, but difficult to believe. So king c5, it still looks as though it might be dangerous for black. In this position, king b6, check. Wasn't played, although that's apparently the best move, better than rook a2. So in the game we saw rook a2, and here taking on a6, check. King d6, king b6. In this position, b4. So was this really theoretically drawn, as the impression is given? Rook c1. Okay, was there anything better? Rook d1 to d5. It looks like a fairly standard drawn rook and pawn ending. Well, especially now. Okay, so it looks drawish now, but I'm going to have to cheat because I think I read something about this. I'm going to check the Fischer Memorable Games book to find where the key improvement was. So game 13, castling into it, what was in this rook and pawn ending? Because I think there was something mentioned. pardon me, game 12, not game 13. In game 12, just fumbling through, there must be something in this position, in this ending. If we go to move 53, apparently this is given a question mark. The engine does peak up here with rook c7 check, unbelievably. How did we miss that earlier? So in this position, after rook c1, rook h8, there's this move rook c7 check, which is in Fischer's notes. And you won't believe this. Well, I thought I was in a special position with the Hertfordshire Chess League to analyse endgames to an amazing degree. But Fischer writes he had stayed up all night analysing and learning a lot about rook and pawn endings in the process. But he reckoned that rook c7 was winning here. Now the engine you see here is showing rook c5. So let's have a look first of all at Fischer's rook c7 check. So king d8. Now Fischer gives rook c5. Actually, this engine line, believe it or not, Fischer is like a Houdini. We have king d7 here. The move here is keeping black's king out with king b7, but also rook takes b5 looks strong anyway from the engine point of view. Fischer gives king b7 exclamation mark, but they're both about the same now, king b7. So the point is keeping the opposition and winning the pawn. That's the whole point of all this exercise. And now this appears to be winning. This ending is winning here. Let's follow it through. For example, take rook b6, b5. Keeping the opposition is the magic needed. King a7. Not minding king c7. Now here it's trouble, isn't it? 'Cause check. This pawn is now big trouble. It's yeah, the king can be cut off here, and now it'll be just building the bridge. So really, in this ending, Fischer did get lucky that rook c7 somehow is an amazing move. Sorry, in this position with the rook on h8 rather with the rook on h8, it seems rook c7 is strong. But let's also, I know, check out rook c5. That would be about equal. Rook a8. If rook b8 check here, that's dangerous again for a transposition with king b7, or even in this position rook takes b5 is apparently promising. But no, I think Fischer's analysis is much more to the point about keeping the opposition here. So he plays rook c7 check, and we see the move king d8. Now the other alternative, if king d6, okay, if king d6, why is this so significant? Check. Say here, king takes b5 here, And if check, rook b6. And the point is this position, maybe king b6. And if check here, king a7. And now in this position, b5, check, rook b3, check. I know this game video has been hijacked by the rook and pawn ending, I'm afraid, but that's what makes it a memorable game. I think Fischer learnt a lot about rook and pawn endings from analysing a key position here all night. So if we get this position, it's okay. It's good for white. The black king can be driven out now. And it's making progress. b6. Okay, 8. We'll be slowly making progress here. So we have this. The pawn is coming down basically. So what was the major finesse? Let's have a quick look at this again. In the game, Gligoric had played casually the move king takes b5. Okay, which allowed check. And now clearly the king can't go on the c file because losing the rook. So the king has to go on the a file. So the white king is going backwards. So otherwise now it's perpetual check if the king's reverberating. So that the white king is forced to b3 passively. And then we just saw rook c8 offering the drawn rook and pawn ending. So that was like skimmed over here. So this possibility of not taking the pawn, well, by Gligoric, he blundered here in not taking the option to not take the pawn. So we see here a key move. Rook c7 check. So rook c7 check. So if king d8, the rook is blocked from coming to b8. And on d6, basically, we see a key difference here, that although there is rook b8 check, there's rook b6, and the king is much more aggressive than on b3 in this position. The king's a lot more aggressive, and this position is actually winning for white. So for those that don't believe that there's a huge number of finesses for rook and pawn endings, I think this is the game. This is the game for the rook and pawn ending finesse in post-mortem. You'd think it was a bit of a dramatic game earlier, and you wouldn't expect the prelude to this game to lead to a very interesting or very important rook and pawn ending, but this appears to be the case here with the king on b5. This is now very, very good for white in the variations. Very, very good. Okay, I'll put the PGN analysis of this in the description of the video if you want to check it out. So that was the missed opportunity. Okay. Hope you got something out of it. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.